You're listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we are talking to Mexican tenor Ernesto Ramirez. Ernesto is currently performing as Rodolfo with the Pacific Northwest Opera. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Is this your first time singing Bohème?
Nope. I've done Bohème a few times. The first time was when I was almost graduating from Boston University as a senior singer. And after that, I did with Boston. Then I had one in France and Montpellier. And then now I'm back to do here in...
That's great. Have you found it very different, each experience, depending on your cast?
Yeah, it's always different. And also, most of the time concert versions of Bohème, they're always popping up. Actually, next week I have a concert and they asked me to do, the part of the first act. And when they say parts of it, it's just basically half of the act.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's fun. It's one of the most performed operas, and I really enjoy singing Bohème. But for the most part, I really enjoy the music of Puccini, which that's what makes me do it.
That's one of your top composers.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel like his work fits your voice comfortably? Like, is it something that's a joy to sing, or is it hard work?
No, it's not hard work. I think you just have to sing with your own voice. You have to. The composers, I think they wrote the music for everyone that can just do it. You know, I mean, I know that nowadays they are more focused on the Fach. Each voice has to have a category.
Right.
But back in the day, it was everyone was just going from lighter to a little bit less light, and these categories just came. The labels came later, but singers used to have a longevity because they went through one repertoire to another without issues. And then in Europe, a tenor used to sing one night, let's say, an Elixir of Love, and then the next day a Pagliacci.
Wow.
And they never had issues.
Right.
They never had issues because they just did it with their own voice. And a lot of those teachers that now most of them, they're gone. But the ones that they still hear teaching, I have a teacher that is really amazing, which is still teaches the old way, and I try to stay within that because I know that over the years I've learned that I want to have a longevity career. I mean,
exactly.
I really don't think about. Everybody's always talking about, when is gonna be the break?
Right.
But
what's your peak?
It's like it's not about being famous or like. I mean, obviously, if you get to that state, a lot of doors will open. But there's been cases where that door opens and then they never come back. Right. It's gone.
Right.
And then it's just the image of, that person made it, but he never basically stayed for a long time.
Right.
And it's only a few cases. But for me, it's more about longevity and enjoying what you do. And I love singing, so I don't mind going from a big theater to a small theater, which actually I enjoy more the small theater because it's more intimate.
Right.
You're able to, people are actually are able to also see your face,
yes,
your expression, your emotions. We intensify it when you sing. It's also with instruments, like I used to play clarinet as well, but the emotion has to be there, and if you intensify it, that's the range of colors that you give to people, and if they're able to experience it at a short distance,
exactly,
the performance is much more I don't know if
like
this
potent.
is a word, like,
the electricity
potent.
is stronger.
Exactly. I mean, when you go to a bigger theater, people see your face like in a very small radio, and then they just focus on, you have to be singing full and out all the time so people can hear you. But then sometimes the musicality that the composer wrote, it gets to be less because you have to be giving full on. And that, to me, I don't know, since I come from the musician part of it, and I grew up doing, playing in orchestra, but also playing with chamber music.
Right.
I love that aspect of chamber music, making music, have all the nonsense of the music telling you it's not just being piano or soft or this or that, but it's the whole spectrum of emotions that the composer tried to write on the music that gives you that impulse, you know?
Right.
And so that's why, I guess that's why I come back, and whenever they tell me, oh, would you like to do a bohem, I will come back and do it at any time.
Right,
you know?
absolutely, and anywhere, and you do end up having a different experience when you're in a smaller house, and you can also feel that energy yourself.
Yes.
And you can feel the audience connected and glued
Yes.
to you that way.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes when it's a smaller place and you're in rehearsals and you're able to bond with your colleagues, it gets to the point where every one of us is involved. You know, sometimes when there are big productions and the other singer is like a few meters away from you,
Right.
you don't feel as connected as much. You just have to be focused in singing out.
Right.
And so in a setup like this, which is a smaller theater, you're able to connect with everybody of your colleagues in such a different way that everybody gives you something and you give back. And that translates into chemistry.
Right.
And that chemistry reads out into the audience. And that, to me, that's the magic of smaller spaces, which I think that's why I keep doing it. And, you know, I don't really care what it is. As long as it's a small venue that people can be able to almost grab you, you know, almost like touch. Oh my God! And because you are actually bringing them with you, to the journey,
Creates a three-dimensional side to the music. Okay, so this is a perfect time to ask my favorite question. I ask everyone is about the magic.
The magic.
And what was a performance that you witnessed? Maybe any time in your career, but usually it happens to people early in their career where they felt it and it hooked them for life. And that was like, I love that. And conversely, an experience that you were in, like you're mentioning, where all of it just kind of clicked. You were connected to your fellow musicians, you were connected to the orchestra, and you could feel the audience was sitting there right with you. And it's been fascinating to hear all the different responses to that.
Well, that's an interesting question. And I mean, I
think the biggest part of it is that in the end, that's what everybody's after. Once you've had an experience or heard an experience, that is something that you can't shake, and something about music that kind of defines why it's so important and unique, because it's very rare that you can achieve those kinds of emotions in daily life.
Well, I've always, I grew up with music, and it's not necessarily classical. And for me, like many times when I heard a song and then the musicians playing it, if I really liked what the meaning was and I connected to it because it had a story, I just couldn't get enough, you know, and I had to go back and either back in the day when you had the cassettes, you know, or actually vinyls or things like that, and then over the years things change, and sometimes they were hard to get. It happened to me actually not so much in the classical but in jazz, because I also experienced playing jazz, and the first time that I heard an album by Chick Corea,
That's awesome.
and it was not really a friend of mine, he bought this from someone, and we were smuggling. I just feel like a smuggler. But back in Mexico, you know, like back in the 90s, there was no way for us to obtain this music. There was no internet, right? And so when this guy brought this, I have this new CD, and it's this guy that is a pianist, and so the first time I heard that, I felt as if the music didn't have boundaries ever again. That I was going to school and I was studying 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you don't get out of the metric, and you have to be very precise. But when I heard that, I thought, man, this is what a lot of people that do like funny drugs experience with all these tones of colors. You know? Yeah, like they go into this, and I don't have to do that for me to experience that because it's such a unbelievable way of playing that he brought me to a different level of listening. And then from there, you know, like because I was playing clarinet and saxophone at the time, he introduced to Eric Marienthal, and then from there I'm like, oh, but who's Joel Coltrane?
Right.
And then my grandfather used to be a saxophone player, so he also used to listen to Charlie Parker, things like that. And then from then on, you know, the music started to embed something in my soul that I could not get rid of it. And the most important thing for me that I discovered early on is that it wasn't so much about how impressive the music will be. What is it that's gonna be led after the impression led after I heard it, right? But it was actually the story that they were telling, and for that, it just marked something for me. I was looking for a story. What is their story? What is the backgrounds that they have? I wanna get more and more and more. So. You know, my clarinet teacher used to be like, oh, just go and go to the department of singing so you can learn how to breathe. So we don't have to go through all this stuff.
Let them do it.
Yeah, so let them do that, and then you'll come and I'll teach you how to play. And he was a very unorthodox, very professor that used to put me in positions, kind of like yoga positions.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I cannot play that scale. I cannot do this. Okay, well, go into this position and then play the thing, and then you'll see. And I was able to do the scale with no problems.
Wow, that's cool.
Because what I understood about his teaching was not so much, what are you focusing on?
Right.
Like, you're too focused into, I can't.
Right.
And he was always trying to free the mind to listen beyond that. And as I start expanding as a kid, listening to all these different ideas and different things, he was always saying, just so you know, jazz is like the devil. If you go there, you're not coming back.
Exactly.
So just keep your focus on the classical too, because, you know. And then he introduced me to Eddie Daniels. And then I was able to meet them all like live, you know.
Yeah, Eddie's awesome.
And so then one time I had this opportunity to meet Michael Collins, which he came to Mexico, and then I took lessons with him when he was there. And he's like, oh, that's wonderful, and you know, but why are you playing? Why are you seeking for this? And when I started experimenting, I said, well, you know, I think the composer is telling a story, and I'm always looking forward to hear what the story is about. What did they wrote this? Like, what is it that, I mean, someone can have an idea and write it and that's it, but what's behind the whole thing? Like, what is music really?
Right.
What is, and I started really fantasizing with the idea that we all as human beings, you know, we always tell stories.
Right.
And we're always, it doesn't matter what happens in the day, you always have a story to tell at the end of the day, either to your parents or now if you're married, to your husband or wife, whatever, your friends. And so the composers are just telling stories, you know, they're writing stories just like a writer. And then that was my big moment for me. And then every time I went to listen an orchestra or a jazz band or a choir or an opera, things like that, I was always interested in the story behind everything. Not so much, oh, how beautiful he plays.
Right, the technical
because, you
side.
know, sometimes you get so technical that I'm sitting there listening to perfection and it doesn't really go anywhere with me.
Doesn't grab.
And sometimes you hear that the technique is not as well executed, but there is more to the notes and there is more to the way it's been played, that it reaches you in a way that can transform that moment. So I guess what I'm trying to answer your question in essence, that's what to me
That's where the magic comes from.
The magic comes from the storytelling of the purpose of that composer or that person trying to do something to the music, rather than looking at it from the perspective of, oh well, it's another Prokofiev, or it's another Bohème. You know, I know that in this area they've been performing Bohème all over the place. But why is being performed?
Right.
Because it's famous, or because it's popular, or because it's one of those operas that when you actually go and see it, even if the performers are good or not, doesn't matter. The story it's been written in a way that that it tells the truth about emotions, and it's right there in front of you. And so whoever is there doing it, whether it's good or not, they're gonna tell you the story, because the composer makes sure that everything that is in there is played.
Right.
And it's done.
It transcends the performance.
Yes.
And the story goes right to you.
And so that's why these operas are amazing. And they call it verismo, which is the truth. And as, for example, an opera that will be by Wagner, they are fantastic. There's fantastic music, but he focuses on archetypes.
Right.
And so if you are more into intellectualism, and you are at a different level in your life where you read and you know about what kind of archetypes we have in society, then you can go and see Wagner and you can go like, wow, he really knew what he was writing about.
Right.
But for the regular person that is just looking not for entertainment, but is looking to see something that is gonna try to transcend them into something else. And this is one of the things that I carry with me, because my first clarinet teacher, he's from Colorado, and he was the principal clarinetist at the Philharmonic of Jalisco at the time. And the one thing that he said to me I will never forget, and he said, someone will come out of their day to see a performance, whether they know the music or not. You have the power to transform that person, because when they come in, they might feel like they wanna, I don't know, they might wanna suicide themselves, because they feel that their lives doesn't have any other day that is gonna shine on them. But you do something, just one note, one something that you can have there, and give them to them, and they will go out feeling that life, it's actually a gift, and
there's
then they can continue, and there is hope.
Yeah,
that's right. So, and that message was his way of saying, never give up. Doesn't have to be perfect. You know, we worked very hard, and I did all the repertoire for clarinetist, and I worked in the orchestra, and I was for me, because I'm always like very curious about things, and so I'm like, well, you can play the regular clarinet, I want to go and play the E flat. Oh, but why? It's so hard.
You're extra special.
It's so hard to tune with the piccolo.
Yeah.
And like, oh, doesn't matter. I just want to play it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, oh well, we're gonna do Persian bass. Bring the alto, the tenor saxophone, whatever. Okay. So, and then I'm playing other things, or then play the bass clarinet, and so then I was doing it because also life is the emotions that we have as human beings, they have colors, and so the instruments, they don't say much, right? That you play a note and it's just a sound,
right?
But we can color those sounds, we can make those intentions through color, and that's what I was always looking for, different ideas and things like that. So in essence, that's how I slowly started getting into the singing, because after he sent me to singing lessons so I can learn how to breathe, the voice developed, and then all of a sudden, like, everybody's like, well, you should be a tenor. And like, oh, I don't know, I just don't want to, I like what I'm doing, and thank you very much. And I'm always rejecting the possibility to be a singer, because I always thought that singers were trained very minimal at the universities, where as for the musicians, you had solfege and harmony
Right.
and fury and this and that. And so I feel like that was more my environment, where I felt more complete. And then you see they had just maybe languages and...
Right. It seems a little less constricted.
Yeah. So in essence, I thought, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And everybody was trying to twist my arm and say, you have to go into that program. And I'm like, no. And singing evolved kind of like in the side, inside the closet. And it's like, well, yeah, I'll sing, but not publicly
Right.
yet. And so that's how, I used to tease my soprano friends when they used to, at the university, every single soprano had to sing The Shepherd on the Rock.
Oh,
I swear
of course.
I swear to God, I said I will never play that again.
I'm done.
Because I did it so many times.
Yes, me too.
I was just like, okay, if a soprano comes and asks me to play that again, I'm be the one that I'm gonna...
You're gonna sing it and they can play.
I'm just gonna hand the clarinet away.
Yes.
But through that, I was kind of coaching them a little bit, like, well, your phrasing is off and it doesn't match to the piano, and I have to, we have to be all together. So I was interested in languages. When I was 15, which is funny because my grandfather used to teach me saxophone and clarinet when I started like around 12.
Okay.
And before that, my dad was teaching me piano, and it's always been...
So it's always been there, but the vocal really wasn't until college.
Well, the thing is, in Mexico, you basically lift a stone, and then you have singers.
Right.
So,
which is very lucky in the culture.
So we get a gathering, and everybody's singing.
Yeah.
And so for us, singing is not a second...
yeah. I'm here. People are always going, my voice is terrible, I can't sing. It's a lot more that you don't sing unless you're good. Whereas there, it's just part of the culture to sing.
Yeah, over there, you can be out of tune.
Right.
But nobody cares. Everybody's just, the song, you sing it, and we all go together.
Right.
And it's about togetherness, and it's about happiness, and being in the moment, being present, which I appreciate of our culture. There is a lot about that, about the present moment. We are there all together, and that's what matters. It's not about the past or the future. It's that moment that matters, and that is also a story to tell, right? And so then, my grandfather kind of taught me, and it was all about more like in the family, and then he said, just go up and apply to the university. Oh, but I'm 15. It's like, so just go. You're ready to go. You're probably beyond the program's, I guess, the level.
Right.
And I said, no, this cannot be possible. It's university level. I'm just 15. I don't even have the high school yet.
Right.
So my grandfather was very tough. So he said, well, it doesn't matter what you tell me. You're going to go and apply. So I said, okay, fine. So I went, did all the necessary applications, and then they said, well, your high school document is not there. Oh, well, I haven't even started high school. Well, you're applying to college and you didn't have high school. That doesn't work. So we're not going to allow you to come in. It's like, well, can I just at least audition for the teacher, so in the future I can have him as my teacher?
Right.
It's like, okay, fine. And so I go, and they present me to Charles, which he's there very...
Yes, I am ready.
Yeah, kind of like very, very tall and straight and very serious. And it's like, what are you going to play for me today? Obviously in his Anglo-Saxon Spanish accent. And I'm, let me see. And I'm just looking through my papers, all disorganized, and a 15-year-old.
Right.
And then I said, well, I'm going to play the Weber concerto. And he was like, Weber? Oh, okay.
All right, well, let's see this.
And then, ping, pam, 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 start playing all the notes. And then he goes like, oh. And then he starts this. And I keep going, ting, pa, 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 pa. And keep with the music, and I finish the first movement. And he's like, how old are you? He's like, I just turned 15. Oh. okay. He's writing notes and all that. Okay, well, thank you. I will go to the office and I'll call you in a moment. So he goes to the office and says, I want this kid.
Awesome.
And then he's like, I don't care whether he has high school or not. I want this kid. So then the school said, okay, well, you have to go and do high school. And you're going to have to do both at the same time, which it was very tough time for me. Because
I'm sure. And you probably didn't really understand what you were getting into, what that means.
No,
right.
But, I was going at the university in the mornings and the evenings. As soon as I finished all my classes, went, did some eating, and then go to the other school.
Crazy.
And so, but because I was on point, just thinking, well, I have to finish this. I have to do something with the papers. I want to really get my degree in the school, and I want to play, and I want to do all these things, but this high school is getting in my way.
Right.
So I started going and putting attention, and so I ended up, the school allowed me to finish in less time if I did all the exams. So I was just studying. So I did like the high school in 2 years.
Wow, just crammed through.
Just like, it was a summary of everything, and I know that, I just had to study and do tests, and so I did that way. They gave me the certificate. Yep. Then I went and put it on the school. It's like, here,
I'm done. No.
I'm done with that. And then, because I was kind of ahead of my playing and all that, after 3 years, I started. I basically finished all the program that you do usually in 4 years, and then the fourth year I had to go like the thesis for, what do they call that? Just the test that is at the end.
Oh, just like that final cumulative exam. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I won this competition, and I went into play as a soloist for the Philharmonic of Jalisco, and I was 18 when I played the Mozart concerto with the orchestra. So it was really exciting for me because I had a goal,
right,
which was to be a professional clarinet player and saxophone player and all that. And everybody was very proud because they thought, well, you came along and you're very focused, which my dad was happy because, in Mexico it's very easy to unfortunately draw out of school.
Right.
And this is why there is a lot of not ignorant people, but people with no much education, but they're street smart. Don't get me wrong, they're very street smart.
Right.
But because in Mexico we have this wonderful opportunity to have free school all the way to university.
Right.
And like people sometimes don't take advantage of that. They think that, well, it's there, and if it's free, they don't really. Some people don't really appreciate it.
They're not valuing it.
They don't value what is there. But they don't understand that, for example, here in the States, people to go to college, they pay a lot of money. Then you end up with a big debt in your backyard that it takes years to pay.
Right.
And when a Mexican can just go to school, be ready to be done, and then you go to work. And like I have friends of mine that after college finished, then they got a job and they bought their house within a year, and then they've been living debt-free for many years.
Right.
And they live comfortably. Right. And there is, it's not the image that we get in the news with, Mexicans,
Of course.
We had all the terrible people coming. It's just, anyways, I don't want to get into that. But the main idea is that that's how more or less start getting into, from being a clarinet player to start kind of getting to sing, because I was teasing the sopranos, I guess, and telling them where to phrase, and then with the language also I was saying, well, what are you saying? Right. You're just going wait. Like,
right.
But what are the words? Like, do you have a verb that is going to be more, stressed, so makes a meaning or something? And they were very like, oh, you're gonna start with you're not a singer, and then I started singing the phrases to them, and they were like, oh, well, you have a voice, you maybe should consider. And so for years that was a lot of people was like, oh, come on, and my friends, we used to go and serenade the girls, right? And so they used to phone me, it's like, hey, are you free?
We need your
Free
voice.
for what? It's like, well, I invite you to tacos. Let's go out for some drinks. And my girlfriend, I just want to, oh, that's your girlfriend,
I
serenade.
want you to sing for her,
And
yeah.
so I play guitar as well, and so I said, okay, fine. Oh, bring your saxophone, the soprano, please, because, and bring your guitar. And so,
That's fun.
like we started going there, and then it became like all night long because all of a sudden we go to serenade this girl, but then the rest of us was like, well, we're out, so you pay the tacos and
Yeah.
we'll just keep going. And so we used to go to in the city at night, just going serenading girls.
Oh my gosh.
And then you start just singing to them, and I start with the guitar, and I swear to God, sometimes I felt so bad because as I'm doing that, my friend is there trying to pretend that he's for her, and the girls just look at you, and they're just like, and I'm looking at the guys, is like, oh man, I think this girl is falling for me because I can see her face. And in fact, later on, they were asking my friends, it's like, oh, my girlfriend is asking about you all the time. So it was funny because you try to not impose a thing, but it used to
It comes out.
be that way where I started going and singing, and just that part of the Mexico that I miss, where you just go. And my father still do it. My father's like 64, and he still once in a while brings a mariachi band at night, like 2 a.m. in the morning.
That's
he
awesome.
comes, knocks at the door, my mom opens, and he serenades her.
Aww.
And it's just like,
That's
who does
awesome.
that? Here, like I remember one time I was in Ventura, and a friend of mine's like, oh, let's go and serenade this girl and all that. We went there, and after the second song, woo, woo,
Exactly.
woo,
I was going to say, no one would let
like,
you do that here.
I turn around, and there's these cops, and they come out, and it's like, sorry, sir, but you cannot do this.
You
You're
can't
disturbing.
sing.
You're disturbing the. And I'm like, disturbing what? We're just singing, like, and
Yeah.
it's like, no, but this is not.
That's not how we
and
do
so
it
I'm
here.
like, okay, fine, we'll fold it and we'll go.
Yeah.
That's too bad for you guys.
My, what a difference, isn't it?
But,
exactly. But there is something about the music and the culture and how it's so part of it. And here it's definitely a separate entity.
Well, it is. I mean, but every country is the same.
Yeah.
Europe has similar, like Spain is very, very. I mean, we have a lot of things that Spain brought to us.
Right.
It's not that, oh, Mexico is just that. It's we have half and half of the two cultures that collided a long time ago, and a lot of those traditions stayed, but then the culture just evolved by itself. Which Spain is a different entity now. They just do other things, and I'm pretty sure England is the same. Like they have their own, they stay with their own English ways of doing things, while North America in general, like the United States and Canada, they evolve into doing other things because there are so many people coming in. We cannot deny that it's the land of immigrants.
New ideas and
new ideas. They collide. Everything collides, where then it becomes different. A complete different entity, and the music evolves different, the way of thinking. So and that's the story, that's what in essence makes me stay with what I do and passionate, because it's always a story to be told. And I think for me that's what the magic lies.
Yeah, I agree.
The story.
I agree. So how did you finished, you're playing the Mozart concerto, you're totally going clarinet. I'm sure your teacher was so sad when you switched to being an opera singer, because he found you at the very beginning. And as a teacher, when you find a student that you can pour your love into, you're like, yes.
Well, it's funny because we kept in touch. We still keep in touch until today. And one time, I remember he was exploring the Alexander technique, and he phones me. He's like, "Hey, how are you?" I was like, "Good. What do you need?" It's like, "Well, I was looking at your resume." I was like, "Oh, you're still looking at me, huh?" It's like, "Yeah, I see that you have Alexander technique under your belt." I was like, "Yes." Can you come and do a master class?
Cool.
And I'm like, okay, so how many people? And well, you tell me and I'll get them. And I said, well, where is it gonna be? And then we're just discussing logistics, and he's like, well, I'm gonna do it in my house. He's like, well, if it's in your house, you cannot fit more than, I don't know, 10?
Yeah.
No, I'll get you 20. I'm like, oh, well, okay,
right.
well, we'll see. So I flew to Guadalajara, and then I went in, and then I asked him to have, different things like a ball and a chair and things and a mat and things like that. And then I set up three kind of like sections. And I started just talking about what Alexander technique is all about, and that I'm more hands-on than to talk about what it is. And I said, well, if you want to read about Alexander technique, just buy a book. But I would like to explain what the movement does to you, and how the body needs mobility.
Right.
And without that motion, the body dies. So we need motion, in essence, for everything. And it's funny because when you have words, a word just by itself without motion dies. Once you put motion, it becomes an emotion, right? With the word, and then it becomes a bigger meaning, and then you can intensify it. So it goes from that to the body translates, because part of our communication as human beings is body language.
Right.
And so I had an oboist, for example. She was so tight, and I could see her neck not moving, and she's like, well, and she's very uptight, And I said, well, I can see by your body language that your play must be very, very, very
rigid
tight, very rigid and strict. Well, I do a lot of Baroque music, and it's like, and also I made them bring their instruments. So I had a few singers, and I had, a few oboists and clarinet players and a bassoonist, and everybody is. I always find it funny that everybody becomes their instrument.
Yes, totally. I feel like that so much. It's like people with their pets.
Yeah.
They end up picking a pet that looks like them. But yes, so it's so true.
So then I didn't say, don't tell me what your instrument is.
I'll tell you.
I tell you by your body language what it is. And so, and they were so like, oh man, that must be impressive to know how to read people. And it's like, well, we have a face, and we have mini expressions, which is micro expressions, and we know when something moves, you have to identify whether that person likes you or not, and that's what we do when you like someone, right? You look at the faces, and by the way they look at you, you can see right away whether you are liked or not,
right?
Or they're telling you the truth, or they're lying, or whatever. It's everything in the language that we have that we don't say, and that's telling a story. And again, I don't know, I revolve a lot on that, telling a story, and to me that is kind of like I don't know if it has become my own slogan, but we tell a story independently whether you're poor, rich, it doesn't matter where you come from. We all have something to say, and you say it with your body before you even met someone. You rapidly integrate. You like that person, you don't, you feel a little bit distant or not. So they all started realizing that they became like the clarinet players. They always tend to be like the runners, because they can do
exactly.
It's always, and I feel like when you grab the clarinet, the first thing you do is a big
exactly,
because that's
the warm up noodle.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, and an oboist is always gonna be like trying to
crow their reed.
And so everybody's different, but the way they set up, and so the oboist, I had them in the ball because the hips were so locked up, and then I had the clarinet players in the chair, because then I brought the instruments to how do you sit in the chair in the orchestra, and then you see their posture.
Feet out.
Oh my God.
It's brutal. Yes,
and
yes,
it's like you see that you're slouching, and they did that. So it was fun.
That's
and
awesome.
I realized that doing that, it also provided me with the notion that I love teaching. I love bringing something to the plate, not just saying the information to them and see how they react, but learning from that back what the story's told, and then they process it, and then they give a reaction back to you, and that it has a story by itself, because it's a feeding story. You're feeding information, you get back. And for me that's very important when I'm also in a small stage, because if someone laughs at something that I've done, that means that they are receptive, that I have them,
Right.
that they're in my hands,
Right.
and I can play, or I can switch to anything, and that gives you the spark to improvise. Just
Right.
like in the jazz music, you know the scales, you know what chord is coming, or you know the all the transition of that piece, but it's not so much that you know that is gonna come the improvisation. You can be very thematic and just play scales, and I'm playing jazz. They just do all kinds of crazy stuff, and that's it. But then if you do not anticipate or go a little bit forward, or change the key in a way that is gonna lead the band to a different scenario, and always keep them in their tippy toes, or they keep you in their tippy toes, that kind of scenario where you always do not, it's almost like playing and someone changes a little bit and then you change with them,
right, the interplay of the conversation.
Yes, exactly, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful just to see by itself. And well, there is many things that had happened in my life, like when I finally decided to become the singer. But at the same time, I was invited to go to a gala of opera in Mexico City at the Opera Theater. My uncle used to play the bass clarinet in the opera orchestra, and he phoned me, like, "What are you doing today?" Like, "Why?" "Oh, because we have this gala, and the saxophone tenor guy just dropped, and I need you. You have to come." "Okay, fine, I'll be there." So I come in and start reviewing all the notes, and I see that this piece. This sounds like a solo piece. I wonder. And then it's like, well, and I ask, "So, do you know who's singing this piece?" It's like, no, we don't know. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of everything, Placido Domingo just walks into the stage, and we're all like, "Who's that?
Hey.
Who's that?" And then the maestro,
Wow.
He asks, "Okay, well, we're gonna do this piece," and I realized
that's your number.
And I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool!" And I had a solo.
So cool.
And so I'm like, okay, well, so then you hear Placido singing, and then I'm singing playing the solo, and it was just that moment that I'm like, wow, that's such an interesting combination of sound and a voice that I've heard in CDs.
Right.
Like,
there it is.
I remember like listening to Placido on the radio when I was a kid. As a matter of fact, he did a thing for kids, like music from Cri Cri, which is a composer that did music for kids, and he did a show on that, and singing songs, and then the little puppets around.
Right.
And so I was growing up watching that Placido singing that stuff, and when you think about it, it's amazing how classical music plays a big role in also people's life. Like I see cartoons,
right.
the cartoons back in the day, they have orchestra.
Right.
They had, all these themes that were classical composers. And so I remember watching, I don't know, like Bugs Bunny.
Right. And there's so much stuff in there.
So much stuff in there.
Yeah.
And so that was fun. And then
that's cool.
I remember that day that I was at the theater, and I entered one of the dressing rooms because nobody was there, and I'm like, I'm just gonna get there and warm up my saxophone. But for me, warm up just meant like I would vocalize a little bit to open up my breathing and all that, and I started just singing a few little snips of arias, and then Domingo enters, like opens the door, and I'm there just with my instrument,
sax on your neck,
and I'm like,
singing.
oh. And then he's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mind to interrupt." No, if this is your dressing room or someone's dressing room, I just leave. I was just, I was gonna warm up my instrument. "Oh, are you by yourself? Because I heard someone singing," and I just got, probably my cheeks went red or something, because I'm like, "Oh, well, and it was me. Sorry, I was just vocalizing. I tend to vocalize so I can warm up my instrument." It's like, "Well, you should sing. You should. You have a voice. I heard these arias, and I thought, that's an interesting instrument. So then I said, well, I don't know. I would like to know what to do next, because here in Mexico you can aspire as too much, right? So,
right.
in essence, he said, well, you can always go to Europe or the States or any other place outside Mexico and make a career and study or something. I'm like, okay, well, very naively, I said, oh, great. And so we did the whole gala, and he left, and then I naively enough, I sold my instruments. I went and sold my saxophones and everything. I just stayed with my soprano clarinet, and then and so I said, well, okay. So I grabbed my only clarinet. I grabbed all the money from my savings of all the instruments, and left Mexico.
Wow.
And I ended up in Los Angeles, and I remember I went to the Dorothy Chanley Pavilion to the artist entrance, and I enter with my suitcase, and I get to where the guard is,
mm-hmm.
and I said to him, "Oh, hi, I come here to see Mr. Domingo." And the guy looks at me. It's like, "Do you have an appointment?" It's like, "No, we just have a gala in Mexico, and I just come here looking for him because he mentioned that, I could come to look for him or something." Well, if you don't have an appointment, it's not gonna happen. So I don't. What's your name? I don't. Well,
mm-hmm.
my name is this. No, I don't see your name here. It's like, so I cannot allow you to enter. Sorry, and you have to leave the premises. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I felt so bad because it's like, oh well, I've never been thrown out of a place that.
Right.
And so I got out, and I'm waiting on the just outside the building, and I'm like, what do I do now? I'm in Los Angeles.
I sold all my stuff, and I'm a singer.
I left home and everything, and I'm here, and what do? I don't even know. Like, my closest family lives about an hour and a half from here up north.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, and then all of a sudden, out of that door comes a guy that I know, a friend from Mexico, a baritone, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, hi, Alfredo, how's it going?" "Well, what are you doing here?" It's like, well, and I explained to him all this stuff, and he laughs, and he's like, well, that Domingo says things to people all the time, right? Like, he encourages everybody. He's always encouraging new talent to get out there and all the stuff, but he was just meaning that in the most superficial way.
He was trying to be loving and encouraging.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's not like and I guess you took it serious. It was like, well, I'm serious, I want to do a career, so. Okay, well, and what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. I'm just here, so I don't even know what I'm going to do next. And in that moment, this man, very short and with a little mustache and with his hat and very Italian looking, he comes out a little bit chubby and comes out, and he says, "Okay, Alfredo, I'm ready, but let's go." And then he says, "Oh, maestro, I'm gonna introduce you to Ernesto. He's a friend from Mexico and all that, and he just came here, and he's trying to study singing more and all that." And okay. Maybe you could hear him, and you can tell him what you think.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, well, I'm staying at the penthouse just across the street. I'll see you tomorrow in the morning. Just come around 10, and I'll hear you. As for me, at the entrance, the concierge will have your name and all that. So I'm like, okay. So I went that night. I was like, well, what is the cheapest hotel around here? There was not much to really, and I didn't want to go to a sketchy place because in Mexico you can see where the sketchy places are, but here in the United States,
all mixed in.
It's all mixed in. You don't know whether it's so you.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to read whether the zones are, and so I stayed relatively close to the area, and the next day in the morning I go and the concierge says, "Oh, Mr. Ramirez, welcome." And it's like, I feel very special now.
Yesterday I got kicked out. Today my name's on the list.
Yeah, and so I go to the penthouse, and when I enter to the apartment, I see already Bruno sitting on the couch drinking beside another famous baritone. His name is Vladimir Chernov, and they're just there drinking in the morning, and it's like, oh, caro, vieni qua, in Italian. It's like, just dear one, come here, and I go in and all nervous, and it's like, oh, what is it gonna be? And then he says, what? Would you like a drink? It's like, no, I'm okay. It's like, oh, don't be shy. And he serves me a glass of wine, and I'm like, well, I think it's too early. It's just drink something. And then, what are you gonna sing for me? It's like, I don't know. And I end up singing, interesting enough, the Que Gelida Marina from Bohème. That's kind of like I knew a few pieces already from opera, so that's what one of my favorites. And I said, okay, I'm gonna sing that one, and I'm gonna impress him. Very. I was trying to be like as certain of myself as anything else. So I was very determined to be heard. Mm-hmm. And as I finished, I was like, well, you have a interesting instrument, and yeah, drink more. And then he's like, what do you think, Vladimir? It's like, yeah, no, it's a very young voice, and he needs training, and I think it's a good start, and it's good. And then he said, what are you gonna do? Vladimir asked Bruno, and like, well, it's like, I'm gonna finish the opera here in about 2 weeks, and at the end, you'll come with me to Switzerland.
Wow.
So I said, okay. So then I went and stayed with my family for those 2 weeks. And then I ended up going to Lugano, Switzerland, and I lived with him for about a year.
Wow.
And he was tough. But I knew what tough meant already, because I had a grandfather that taught me a lot of things.
Right.
So he was teaching me a lot of things of the opera world that I didn't know.
Wow.
And that really made my life a bit more, what is my vocation? Mm-hmm. In the end, it's not about like going get a career and get a degree and see what you can do, but it's what is the real vocation that you have as someone that is gonna take a pledge on a lifetime, rather than just like, well, if this doesn't work, I'll go do something else.
Right.
Which I hear quite often here in the States. Mm-hmm. The kids go to school and then that, oh, it's not happening, it's happening. Well, and then they quit, they go do something else because they went for a degree, but the vocation of doing something is not there.
Right.
It's just like, well, I'm gonna be famous, and then I'm gonna, it's all a goal.
Right.
They just, in the schools, they said, well, if you make it, you're gonna have a tremendous career. But what is the percentage of people that end up making it?
Right.
Because they actually have, trustworthy voices, or they just have good connections, right?
Exactly.
And so sometimes that tells you what the campus will take you, either north or you just go other ways.
Right.
But a true vocation doesn't matter whether you get a break or not. You still have to sing, and you still have to wake up in the morning and do your diligence to the art form that you chose, because that's your passion, that's what you like, that's what you love. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you have a family, oh well, today I don't feel like,
today
I'm not gonna feed my kid, I don't feel like it. You can't do that.
Right.
It's your duty now, it's part of your life, and you have to be there to embrace it. And I remember within that year with Bruno, thank goodness I learned Italian in Mexico, because I was interested in languages back then, because Italian was my first language that I learned after Spanish, then French, and then English. So English kind of was in the mix kind of later, because I needed to move out of Mexico. So, well, what is the language that everybody speaks? Okay, English. Okay, well, I go and do that.
Right.
And so I took that as a priority. But the fact that I spoke Italian already when I met Bruno, that just
made it so that you could go. Really?
Yeah, it proved to me that sometimes we align to these energies that you get there and you're ready, and you just take the ride instead of struggling like, well, how do I put my seatbelt,
right?
You know, and I don't want to be in a rocky. You don't
exactly.
know, but you just take the plunge and you do it. And I remember for my birthday, he's like, "Well, today is no class. I'm not gonna give you class today." I'm like, "Oh, but why not? Like, you know, every day is a knockout." And so he's like, "No, I need to go and buy wine and bread and all that stuff." And it's like, "Okay, so where are we going?" "Well, we're gonna go to San Francisco del Pane, or some town that is near Asti in Torino or Turin." And then he's like, "And from there we're just gonna go to Modena and we're just gonna go around." "Oh, okay, so but you are gonna drive." I'm like, "Me? Okay." So he took me driving, and I'm driving in Europe, in Italy. And as we buy the wine and the bread and all that stuff, we get to Modena, and I'm like, "Oh, it's a pretty town." I was clueless of what that town meant for many people.
Right.
And so then we get to these gates of this place, and then the gates open, we enter, park the car, get out of the car, got the souvenirs or whatever that we brought. And then I see in the distance this guy that's coming, Bruno, caro, It's just very loud, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, is that what I'm thinking? And I was Pavarotti, you know.
Oh my goodness.
And then they come and embrace themselves, and hey, caro, and these very loving Italian people, and he asks, "Oh, who's this?" And Bruno's like, "Oh, my student, you know, my il mio allievo." Yep. They are very proud of what they get.
Yes.
And so we ended up spending the evening there.
Wow.
And then, you know, like, then they start with the wine and just drinking and talking about their experiences in life, and I'm just listening, captivated by the whole thing. I'm still not believing that I'm in the presence of these people that have made legend already, and I'm just a newbie, and I don't know anything about the art form or whatever. And so then Bruno's like, "Oh, sing something for him." I'm like, no. I'm already.
It's my birthday. It's a day off. Remember?
It's like I'm feeling tipsy because they've been feeding me wine, and so then it's like, okay, and then Bruno's like, "Sing Furtiva Lagrima," which is the famous Elixir of Love song, and I'm like, "Oh, but this is the aria that this guy sings, and he's the king for that." And I'm like, and I just start shaking, and I stand up and you know, and start just singing, and finish the first part, and you know, it's all a cappella, and then Luciano's like, "Oh, molto bene." He's just been very appreciative, and then he's like, "Okay, let's start again. When you sing, the music doesn't say piano, okay? It says dolce, and that's a very different, very different from the what they say piano. Now, dolce doesn't mean that you're gonna constrict everything that you have in your throat. When you open and you breathe, you still have to let the sound out, and so do it like me." He's like, and so he started just doing the first sound, and I'm like, oh. And I'm like, okay, and then I do it, and then he turns to Bruno and like, "Oh, he's actually, he picks up the information quite fast." And then I sing the phrases again, and he's working on the breathing and this and that. "Oh yeah, good." He's like, "Oh, that's a good voice, you know, that's you're good, but I'm the best." You know, and so he's just a funny guy. And then after that, it's like, you know, I wish at the time I had an iPhone or something to take pictures, but it just didn't. He didn't. I guess Bruno didn't tell me where we were going, you know.
Right.
And I just said, well, I'll just go along with it.
Yeah.
And
he made you be present in that moment.
And a lot of the experiences that I've had back in the day, they were like that. There's just like no time to. Nowadays, everything is, I'm gonna take a picture and a selfie and a this and a that, and it's just all these new social media situation that I find myself sometimes is a bit too much.
Yep.
Because then, like, these stories for me is my own treasure, you know.
Right.
So it's the things that I treasure for myself. You know, and sometimes people, oh, do you have pictures of this or that? And it's like, no, I don't. The pictures are in my head, and the experience and and what they make me feel, and that love that people give you when you meet them, you know, and so that's the story. That's the story that spoke to me, and that gave me something to go ahead and continue. Because also Bruno, at the end of that year, he said, okay, I think I trained you enough, now you're gonna be in your own, so just remember, your voice is like gold, and you have the gold, but if you let anybody else rob that gold, at the end you're gonna be poorless. You don't have gold. So you better always take care of that gold. And if someone wants part of it, well, negotiate it to the point that, okay, you want a little bit of it, okay, this is the cost.
Right.
You know, it's
don't
not
give it
free.
away for free.
And he says you are allowed to say no if something doesn't fit your persona, or if it's not it's against or going against your values, or if something doesn't read correctly for you, you are allowed to say no. And you know, sometimes that will inform someone that maybe you don't want to work, but it's not that, it's just that it's not for you,
right?
You know, and you have to know, you don't want to go to a place where you said yes because you just wanted the opportunity, but then burn to ashes because you couldn't really do the job. And then, you know, after that, you know, wonderful things have happened all the time, and I met fantastic people along the way, and I've had so many opportunities, and you know, it's been a career that sometimes I feel like a ghost, because people remember you sometimes, and sometimes they don't, or sometimes don't even know who you are, because it's also not like a pop career, you know, where everybody knows you and all that. So some companies is like, well, who's that guy? Some other companies will like, oh yeah, we heard him at radio or something, but doesn't mean that you don't have the experience. It's just that they haven't heard you. And you know, it's a very vast universe of opera houses out there.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's so many musicians out there trying to find a way, and I think I love hearing your story about how you were brought in, because so many of the musicians that I've spoken with, that's a thread that everyone has had. There's been some sort of teacher or somebody who's picked them out and gone, that's one. And it's the time that you got to spend in those really close quarters and on those special adventures that gave you all the information you needed, and now you can go out and you know exactly what you need to do, and it doesn't make you second guess, and you're just going to do it, and you had that time. And I think those moments are so special, harder to come by, and more and very lucky. And you literally were there at the right place at the right time, and those things are fabulous. And like you said, with your languages, I think some people get discouraged if they don't get the audition, or this thing or that thing doesn't happen. They want it and it didn't happen. But sometimes you have to backlog a ton of experiences or learn languages and you don't even know why. And then your moment comes and it's not the moment you thought you were expecting. And you have to be ready to run and do it.
You know, another thing that happens nowadays is that, I mean, the demand on musicians and singers and all that is greater than before. Therefore, the competition is fierce, but there's still this uniqueness that everybody brings to the plate. That I mean, people forget that everybody's unique,
right?
And that's the beauty of this: is that no person is gonna sound the same. It doesn't matter if it's even a clarinet,
right? You really are different.
Yeah. I mean, the phrasing, the way you, I don't know, maybe do staccato, how you use your tongue to make all these little. The staccato,
different articulations,
the articulations and everything. I mean, it's. I mean, I remember, I met Michael Collins, which he's a great clarinet player, and that's unbelievable things. And he plays like the instrument doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like when you see the fingers, and it's like, oh my God, how he's doing that?
Yeah.
But then I met Joan Enrique Yuna, which is a Spanish clarinet player. I don't know if you heard of him, but I remember taking a few lessons with him, and he was more about the sound, And with Michael was more about, because his sound is very British, and it's a very thin kind of very clean sound.
Yeah.
But with John is the sound was bigger and I don't know,
more dense and
warmth
rich,
and rich and all that. And the different I have also manufacture now my clarinet. I still play, like last year I did a concert with no, actually that's not true. This year at the beginning of the year we planned a concert because a friend of ours is a composer. My wife is a mezzo soprano, and she also plays piano, and it's amazing that she can do two things. And and so she was saying to me, well, you have your clarinet, and I see you playing in the room once in a while, and I hear you just executing all these things, and why we don't put a show where instead of singing, or we sing a little bit, but then
you do your other voice.
I accompanied you in your clarinet.
That would be awesome.
And so we put the whole theme, like we sang things from Carmen, but then the fantasy of Carmen for clarinet and piano. And so I said, okay, well, let's do it. So
that's cool.
It brought me back into really getting, and actually I have the bakun, the barrel and
bell.
And the bell. So, and she's like, oh, why do you have those things in your clarinet? They looks weird. And it's like, oh, because the sound is amazing. So, and I always wanted that when I was a clarinet player,
right.
And I never was able to get something like this. Now I'm not playing as much, but
right, but you've got the goodies.
So, yeah, and so I now I have the ligature and everything else that goes with it, like the BG.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm able to afford nowadays the things that I couldn't afford when I was a youngster. So, and it's funny because then, it's interesting. Back there, I was I have to get this right. I have to get this right. Then there was a time that I left the instrument by itself for years, and then I started getting back to it, and there was something new. All of a sudden, I was not worried about the scales, and I was able to do them. Like I was playing, some songs, and is that the yeah. So, and I know that there is this awesome part that is there's all these notes, but there was something about it that I was able to play, and now I was not worried about the notes. I was actually coloring and making it more expansive, and it just brought. I said, okay, I think I understand now what the magic is. I grown. Now I'm enjoying playing because I'm not worried of what people say, what they want to hear. It's me and the instrument, and it's almost like being naked in the wild.
Right.
And you're there, and you know that there is predators that are gonna come at you, and your skill is to survive.
Right.
But it still is you and the nature, and you and yourself with your own nakedness in terms of that magic that happens that nobody can explain to you unless you are living it.
Right. Exactly.
And so I don't know if that's the only way to explain it.
I think that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And by taking that time to do the voice, you were spending more time in sound and color and story and language and that whole aspect of it. So then when you come back to something that has different constrictions, fingerings and challenging partials and voicings,
and no words.
Yeah, and no words and no vibrato often, and different kinds of problems.
Yeah.
You're coming at it from a new direction, and sometimes it releases some of the boundaries that were there.
Yeah, even the staccato, like, back in the day, I'm too heavy on this, and now I can't really
much lighter
be heavy on it because everything has to be open. And also, I cannot put too much pressure in my mouth, because otherwise if I start tightening up all the muscles around the mouth, then when I'm singing, all that is
too tight,
and I cannot express with the words. So that also taught me things to be making pianos and diminuendos and all that. And for me, the real story, that I love soft music. I hate loud, and because I think everybody can play loud and scream, but the real, for me at least, the real essence of the magic happens when you have these sounds that are so almost like, am I hearing something? And they come out of nowhere. That to me, and especially in the clarinet, when I hear something like that, it just moves my soul in a way that I can't.
Those whispered entrances.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, of course, it's the most challenging way to play is to really play a beautiful, almost silent. But yeah, it's the most voice-like and whisper-like.
Yes. But I think most of the time when I see these, when we face our fears, when we are facing it, and that transition is where the real truth lies, because sometimes we back away from it because the fear is so intense that we say, I can't. But when we really go for it, and that's the other part of being a singer, that I don't have an instrument in between. Now I'm really,
now
I
you're
feel
really
like
in nature.
Yeah, I'm really there, and I feel like, okay, whatever happens. I don't have anything else that I can do besides, I know that I have a technique that I worked for years, but now what else can I do? What else can I grow? Like when you do a performance, people is like, oh, I came and see you. Like, for example, our friend Charlie, she comes and says, I've seen it now for like 4 times, and it's like, great. And have you seen any changes? Well, every night is different, and it's really, it shouldn't be the same every night. One night you don't feel like doing that phrase that way, but and I take the impulse from the other actors, singers that are on stage, where if someone is doing something a little bit different, I know that we're all doing the same,
right?
But it's the same in the orchestra. Some nights one finger is not gonna be there as usually happens, so you have to move a bit to do something different. And conductors and viola players or violin or everybody, that piano players, anybody that is in that aspect, we all know that to play perfectly you need to let go of the fear of being perfect.
Right. Yes. I think that's another big theme of all instruments, all voices, this whole concept of you're going to have to give up perfection to take the risk to get the magic. And it's something that you can be told a million times, but I think each person has to finally get to the place where they're willing to do it, because we spend so long trying to be perfect. Because you're told if you're not perfect, you don't get to get in. And then once you're in, they say, okay, now impress me. Now I want some magic. So how do you do that?
We never end. I mean, and that's where I say, this is a vocation. So one day you're perfect, one day you're not. And, like when you are, it doesn't matter what level you are. You just have to know that we're still human at the end of the day. And we have flaws, and we have fears, and we have our days where we feel invincible, and other days where, it's like the sky. One day there is sun, another day is rain. Like, nothing you can do. Just enjoy what comes, right? Because that's what we have to learn at the end, and that enriches us. Because, for me, now it's not about so much about the music, it's about what life brings me and what else I'm gonna be getting, what else I'm learning and I'm gonna get out of it. Because I know material things we're never gonna get or take with us wherever we go after this. And right now, I feel like I'm at the middle of the career, and I have other, like most of the teachers that I've, like Bruno, for example, he's like 70 something, and he's not singing anymore, but he's teaching and he's giving all that information out. And my other teacher, Hermano Mauro, which is another retired tenor, that had an impressive career, but they are down to earth people, and they still so rich in their information that is invaluable. For me, it's just like, it doesn't get better than that. And it's not, they are not teaching at universities.
Right.
You don't get them at the universities because they are not interested in curriculums. They are not interested. They don't have time to. It's like, well, the university is telling me that I have to push all these ideas into these kids. I don't have time for that because I want to really pass the information slowly. It's like a drip coffee,
Yeah.
It's one little drip at a time, and it takes time to sink in. And I think our society nowadays, with all the technology that we have, is fast, and nobody stops to think.
Yep.
It's all these. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm not. I mean, I'm savvy at all the technology, but I hate to be on it. And I don't like my cell phone. I think it's helpful, but as you can see, I don't have it with me. I just feel like I don't want to have the device ringing every few seconds. It's like it just gets annoying.
Yeah.
Because as you can see right now, we have a view of this unbelievable West Coast, and colors and awareness is what we need, and that gives you back to, oh well, I feel now fulfilled that I seen all these, and then I go back to work.
Right. Right. And
back to the little.
It keeps informing.
Yeah.
Your creativity and informing the way that you feel when you're reacting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. It's been a beautiful conversation.
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Be sure to check the Inside the Notes Facebook page for details on our next guest.